Welcome in to the College Football Power Hour. That's Jason Fitz. I am Caroline Fenton. We normally have Adam Brenneman with us. No Adam today. Fitz, he's big-timing us. He's big-timing us tonight. Just you and me taking over the ship.
Look, that's good because we got plenty to talk about. We don't need a third voice. Look, this show is called the College Football Power Hour. Like, Caroline, I have been sober in my health journey this year. I need a damn drink. All I'm saying is, like, just trying to figure out what happened today. And I joked when I was talking to somebody this morning, and I said, look, this looks like a pretty lame Saturday. And every time I've said that this year, it's been a weird Saturday. This wasn't a weird Saturday. This was like somebody took the script of college football, lit the whole thing on fire, and said, congratulations, you wanted chaos. You now got it.
Have you ever seen the movie Uncut Gems with Adam Sandler? Yeah. Mm-hmm. After that movie, I don't smoke, but I was like, damn, now I know what people mean when they say, I need a cigarette. I'm just sitting on the edge of my couch, like heavy breathing, sweating. That's how I felt in every single window today in college football. After the end of these games, like my heart rate is on 10. I'm sweating and I'm like, damn, I need therapy. I need a cigarette. I need a drink. I need to take a walk. I need to touch grass. I don't know what I need, but that was today in college football. And even going into this week, it felt a little bit funky, right? Because in July and August at the beginning of the season, I didn't think Ohio State, Indiana was going to have college football playoff implications and be the biggest game in the country. Yet here we were. I didn't think that Notre Dame and Army would have college football playoff implications. Yet here we were. I didn't think that Alabama and Oklahoma would feel like such an inconsequential game. But surprise! Here come the Oklahoma Sooners, and now all of a sudden they look like a college football playoff team taking down Alabama and Norman. We'll get into all of that, but the chaos of today, when we've talked all season about things are going to work things out, the college football playoff system is going to work itself out because it always does. We always get more and more clarity as the weeks go on. I have the least clarity on the top 12 teams, the 12 most deserving teams, the 12 best teams, however you want to slice and dice it. I have less clarity about the college football playoff picture today than I have had all season long, Fitz.
Yeah, I'll take it a step further. I've been covering the college football playoff since 2017. This is the least confident I have been ever this late in the season in trying to figure out who actually belongs in this thing. And think about it, Caroline, everything we were sure of at noon Eastern today when the game started, we were sure had changed at 3 o'clock, and then we had it all figured out. Yeah. And then all of a sudden we hit 6 o'clock, and we're like, okay, no. Erase those answers. We got new answers. By the time we get to midnight on this one day, our concept of who belongs in the college football playoff has already changed today 3 or 4 times. Like, this is unprecedented, but this is what's beautiful about it. When people hit us up with, the social media responses about, well, college football is broken. How can you possibly say that? Right now we have a playoff and I don't know who's going to be in it. Right now, every single week feels like a true elimination week for teams. Right now, every single game, when the argument was games would have less meaning, games have more meaning because we're sitting here obsessing over, I was obsessing over Boise State taking on Wyoming. Like, what world is that? That's what's happened in this college football playoff expansion. And yeah, I agree with you. I don't know who the top 12 teams. I'm glad we're not on the college football playoff committee because that feels like an impossible job right now. Mm-hmm. But man, I don't think the sport's ever been better, ever been healthier, ever been stronger than it is after what we saw on a day like today.
We hate change. We as people, as humans, we hate change. And I'm guilty of it. I hate change, especially when it comes to something that I view as traditional as college football. College football isn't broken and college football isn't worse. College football is just different. And I think that in a world where we're talking about the group of 5 race between Army and Tulane and Boise State, I like that matters. I like that conversation has championship implications. And I like the fact that we can argue literally all day long. You want to go toe-to-toe with someone on Twitter? We're going to go toe-to-toe with each other here on this show. Right now, there's no wrong answer. Genuinely, truly, I do not think that anyone is right or anyone is wrong in legitimate campaigns for some of these teams in the college football playoff, if it's including Indiana. And that's crazy because they just got blown out against the only good team on their schedule.
nobody's wrong. Man, I really, that's so beautifully said by you. And I've said for years, the concept of my conference is better than your conference is really like my dad can beat up your dad. Like it's never actually going to happen. They're never going to fight. We don't actually know the answers. And if you saw it today on social media, there was a period early on in the day where everybody that's not a Big Ten fan wanted to jump all over how much Indiana sucks. And then by the end of the night, all those same Big Ten fans that were just getting trashed are coming at SEC fans about how much the SEC sucks. Like maybe this year the answer is nobody sucks to that level. Maybe the answer this year is simply that we don't have easily defined greatness. And as a result, what we have are a lot of good teams, not great teams. I don't think this is bad football. I think this is a lot of teams that have weaknesses. There's more parity across college football, which, by the way, is what we want in every sport. We want more teams competing. I think to your point, instead of making it the sky is falling and instead of making it I'm right and you're wrong, we all need to step back a little bit and acknowledge that every one of these buts has some merit to it right now. Mm-hmm. Every one of these teams has a reason you should include them and a reason you should leave them out.
Every single team in consideration, every single team in the top 25 has a flaw, whether that's number of losses, quality of losses, lack of quality wins, a low strength of schedule, or, maybe some unimpressive wins against lesser opponents. Whatever it might be, there is a hole that you can poke into every single argument. And that is what makes this sport feel healthier than it's ever been. I'm done with these predetermined outcomes that it feels like we have in July and August. Ohio State and Alabama are probably going to play in the national title game. I like the parity. The parity is fun. The parity is different. The parity is a change. The parity might be something that we all as college football fans feel a little bit uncomfortable with, but it's a good thing. And I do want to start with the game that I just mentioned, Ohio State, Indiana. It's the biggest game in all of college football. All eyeballs in America were glued on what was going on at the shoe. Noon kickoff, much to the dismay and the chagrin of Ohio State fans. And our conversation all week was really dominated by, okay, well, what happens if Indiana loses? How does Indiana lose? If it's a close loss, how does the committee look at that? If it's a blowout, how does the committee look at that? It was the latter. It was a blowout loss, 38-15. Ohio State takes this one. And it really kind of felt like a 31-7 game because there were some garbage time scores late in that game, but it was a close game in the first half. Indiana had, the dropped snap. The punter dropped the snap before halftime. Ohio State got the ball at like the 10. They were able to make it 14-7 at halftime. And then Ohio State outscored Indiana, 21-7 in the second half. Ohio State just absolutely pulled away. There's so many ways that we can look at this game. I think the most important conversation, though, is what Indiana did against Ohio State and how the committee is going to view what Indiana did, or really what they didn't do against Ohio State.
Look, I fully expect, even in a chaotic day, a free fall for Indiana from the College Football Playoff Committee. And part of the reason is, yes, I hear you that it was a close game in the first half, but was it? Indiana moved the ball well on their first drive. And then the vaunted offense that we've heard so much about this year didn't move the ball the rest of the game. And frankly, there were a couple of stupid plays by Ohio State that kept them from scoring in the first half. They had a couple of trips to the red zone they didn't get anything out of. This game could have been a bloodbath at halftime. And they pointed that out on the broadcast. Like, hey, this is only a couple of plays away from getting out of hand. And I saw, again, social media at the time reacting, saying, well, it's favoritism. No, this game was just teetering on the brink of blowout. And then all of a sudden it happened. To me, Indiana right now, when you came into the game with the 106th ranked schedule, you had to show the world that nothing about what you did has been a fluke. That didn't happen. I mean, this is now 2 weeks in a row. They played a terrible Michigan team, and their offense didn't look nearly as good as we're used to seeing against, again, let me say loudly, a terrible Michigan team. And then they go into Ohio State. I don't think they had to win this game. I don't think they even had to be that close. I think they had to be close going into the fourth quarter in a game that really felt like it was on the edge of being, it could go either way. Instead, this thing felt like Indiana was hanging on for dear life from the outset to me. If I'm on the committee, I'm sitting here saying, hey, what we just learned is Indiana can't compete at that level. I truly think even with all the chaos ahead of them, I would be stunned if Indiana's not sitting at 15-16 in this week's.
There were so many moments in that game where I was sitting on the couch watching on TV, yelling at my TV saying, you can't win games like this doing that. You cannot win games against the number 2 team in the country in their own house with a bid to the college football playoff on the line and drop a snap and give Ohio State the ball within the 10. You cannot give up a kick return touchdown or a kickoff touchdown, the opening of the second half to Caleb Downs and let him find the end zone. Now, all of a sudden, you're down 2 touchdowns and you're looking around like our special teams just gave up 14 points. You can't win football games like that. You cannot be down for the entirety of the second half and run the football 41 times to just 18 pass plays. You're not going to dig yourself out of a deficit or even win games playing football like that. That I just felt like Indiana had such a formula for winning football games all season long, and a lot of that is just playing sound football. And we just didn't see that today. And what we talked about last week on the podcast, I see all the stats. I see how great Indiana's run defense is, how tough and physical they are up front. I see how Curtis Rourke is able to move the football. I see how balanced they are and how balanced they want to be offensively. But however you want to put it, overall, Ohio State is just bigger, and they are better, and they are faster. They're better athletes. Overall, that just kind of felt like it was inevitable at some point. Although it was close in the first half, although Indiana was able to hold Ohio State to just 1 touchdown for a majority of the first half, it felt like the dam was going to break at some point. And once Caleb Downs found the house, that's really what felt like, the floodgates were opening.
I mean, think about just some of the numbers on this. And I know numbers can get a little overwhelming, but win probability is part of how game control is. That's one of the metrics the committee considers is game control. I looked back at the win probability. There was only 1 drive in the whole game where they gave any win probability percentage to Indiana, and it was 51.4%. The rest of the game, all of the win probability percentage went to Ohio State, which shows you that the advanced analytics thought that, frankly, this game wasn't close. Curtis Rourke was 8 for 18 for 68 yards. Indiana ran the ball for an average of 2 yards a carry. 2 yards a carry. All right. So, and then you got Will Howard over here, who wasn't supposed to be the reason that Ohio State wins. And Will Howard goes 22 and 26 for 201 in a particularly efficient game. Like, Ohio State didn't really win this game by simply dominating the ground, which is what I thought was going to have to happen. Ohio State won this game by simply being clearly, like from the eye test, clearly bigger, faster, stronger, better in every phase of football. And that, how do you get that out of your head? Because at some point when you're looking at the top 12 teams, do you really want to put a team into the playoff that the one time you've seen them against a true playoff caliber team, it was clear simply watching the game that they were not big enough, strong enough to be able to compete at that level? You can't put that team in the playoff with a clear conscience because you're sending them to get slaughtered.
If I was on the college football playoff committee and it was as simple as, is Indiana in the college football playoff, yes or no, I have to say no. And of course, that's dependent of all the other chaos that's going on around college football. Teams
they got some help. They got some help today. Let's be honest.
They got a lot of help. And if that's how they get in, then it'll be from the help that they get around them and not from their own merit. When you have, the 110th, 113th, 100 and whatever ranked strength of schedule, and you've beat up on 6 of the bottom 8 teams in your conference, and you play a 7th next week in Purdue. And look, you shouldn't get punished necessarily because it's not like you make your schedule. All you have to do is beat the teams on your schedule, but you also don't get rewarded for playing, I'll say it, a cupcake schedule. So I would have to say no, because Indiana simply has not proven to me that they are one of the 12 best teams in the country. And everybody wants to talk about brand bias. Everybody wants to talk about, you're just an SEC home or you're an ACC home or whatever it might be. That's not what it's about. It's not about brand. It's not about conference. It's about the fact that Indiana has not played anybody. And it's one thing to look great against bad opponents. We saw that from Indiana all season long, probably with the exception of the Michigan game. Wasn't a great game, but they found a way to win. But when you play one of the best teams in the country and you look like that, you put up 150 yards of offense, I'm sorry. You don't get to play for a national championship. You haven't deserved it.
Yeah, and look, as I've said a million times, I will remind the world, I don't have a favorite college football team. That's why I love covering this sport. I don't give a damn who wins every Saturday. I want total chaos. Like today was my euphoria because everybody's mad, right? And that's what I love. I love it when everybody's just lathered up over college football. That's all I care about. But to your point, you got Notre Dame out there playing the 85th ranked schedule. So what did we say coming into this game? Notre Dame was going to have to absolutely destroy Army, I thought, from the outset to just eliminate any questions. What did they do? They came in and absolutely destroyed Army. Like there are certain things you have to do. And if you are a team, for example, like Notre Dame with an inexcusable loss on your schedule, you lose all wiggle room. You better be so dominant against a team that the committee says is a top 20 team that you leave no question, right? That we can talk about that all day long. The difference is against that top 25 team, Notre Dame looked like they were in a complete different class. They looked like the team bigger, stronger, faster in every possible way than Army. And they remind you, oh yeah, no, that loss was a fluke. There's no opportunity for Indiana to show everybody that today was just a bad day. All we're going to have in our minds is that, well, Indiana finally played somebody and they got their asses kicked. And that's real. Like, that's what they left. That's the product they put on tape. The tape doesn't lie. And today the tape showed that Indiana is not capable of competing with Ohio State. And if they're not capable of competing with Ohio State, how are they capable of competing with Oregon? How are they? And if you're in the college football playoff committee, how can you possibly think that they're capable of competing with Texas? I mean, you go up and down the list here. All of these teams have had a fatal flaw, but they've at least shown you something against a real opponent that you can hang your hat on. We haven't seen that from Indiana.
I think every team has a different margin for error. Indiana's margin for error was just so much smaller than the rest of the field because their schedule was significantly easier. Even the team that you just named, Texas, and we have plenty of time to get into this. I want to focus on Saturday, but if Texas loses to Texas A&M next week, I do not think that Texas has a resume that's strong enough to get into the college football playoff. Now, they still probably would, just given, again, all of the chaos that ensued this week and probably will continue to ensue next week. But Texas doesn't have a quality win. Texas's best win is on the road, a 3-point win over Vanderbilt. The one good quality team that the College Football Playoff Committee has said, yes, this is a good team, we value this as a good win, was Georgia. And Texas looked terrible against Georgia. So I think that would be a fair argument to make is Texas with 2 losses if they lose to Texas A&M at Kyle Field next week. Are they a strong enough team to get into the college football playoff? These margins for error, that's what it is. Yeah, they exist for every team. It's not just Indiana. It's not just Notre Dame. It's any team in any conference, and those margins just look different based on strength of schedule and the way that you beat up on teams.
I mean, if one of the games we're going to get to, if Penn State had lost today, I don't know that I could say that they were a shoo-in for the college football playoff because the resume just isn't there. And we keep joking that the best
thing on the resume is a loss to Ohio State.
100%. So like this is just why you can't necessarily apply a universal property to all of this. Like Indiana knew coming into it, they had to know as a program, everybody involved had to know you get your ass kicked in this game, you're hanging on for dear life. And even though there's total chaos above them, man, I'll be really interested to see what the committee thinks of and I know fans are going to freak out, but a 1-loss Indiana team is going to be valued less than some of these 3-loss teams out there. It's just going to happen now. And there's nothing that's going to change that because the wins just don't have the power behind them for Indiana.
Hell, I might take a 5-loss Florida over a 1-loss Indiana team.
Ooh, that Florida team. We'll get to why I'm eating crow also. But
we'll get to that.
Can we just talk about the fact that right now, remember years ago, remember the Clay Helton year? I think it was 2017, 2018, when Clay Helton lost his first 3 games at USC and then all of a sudden went on a run. And everybody was like, oh, what do you, by the end of the year, it was like, man, I'm glad we're not playing USC. How many, like right now, Kansas and Florida are both looking around thinking, wait, guys, no, we could have been in this conversation. Like, it's wild. It is wild.
If only we didn't suck at the beginning of the season, we could be pretty darn good. But hey, bowl eligibility didn't feel so bad. We'll get into that. But we have another massive upset in the SEC to talk about. We've been talking about chaos all show long. What about Oklahoma? Oklahoma that was 5-5 going into this game. Oklahoma, that had one SEC win going into this matchup against Alabama. Alabama ranked 7th in the country. All they had to do was beat Oklahoma and Auburn next week in the Iron Bowl, 2 of the worst teams in the SEC, and they're a shoo-in for the college football playoff. But no, because week 13, that's the week of chaos. Week 13 is the week of getting exposed. And Alabama got exposed. Oklahoma, a team that's been truly dreadful, that could not score points all season long, took down Alabama 24-3. 24-3. I don't even know how to conceptualize that in my brain until myself from just 2 days ago that was going to happen, that Jalen Milroe, who ran for about 8,000 yards over the past couple of weeks, that Alabama, a defense that's given up, 2 touchdowns over the last 3 weeks, a Jalen Milroe offense that felt like it was really starting to figure itself out, that was really starting to find its identity. Well, that defense gave up, they had a defensive touchdown, so what's 24 minus 7? 17? 17. Gave up 17 points. And an offense that only had 234 total yards. Sooner magic. Sooner magic,
look,
Fitz.
Alabama got shellacked. And I have, since we started this podcast, I'm honest about the things that I get wrong. It's something I hang my hat on all the time. I will always be honest about things I get wrong. Every once in a while, I'm going to take a victory lap, and this is another victory lap because I said coming into this season that Alabama was just going to lose games they shouldn't lose. And this was that exact, from the outset of this game, they were flat against Oklahoma in an SEC game where, to your point, Caroline, they had everything in front of them. And Jalen Milroe was awful in this football game. Awful. I don't even think, look, the numbers are bad. He was 11-26 for 164 with 3 picks. And pick 6 action in there. That sounds bad. He was even worse than that. And Oklahoma came in. Brent Venables, a noted defensive mind, came with a really good game plan to make sure that Jalen Milroe was never comfortable using his feet. Oklahoma was able to do everything that I thought LSU would do last week and just couldn't get done. And what you ended up with was an Alabama team that just got knocked out repeatedly over and over and over again. And look, I'll be consistent here. I thought that Alabama would find themselves losing 3 or 4 games this year because there's a cultural difference with Kalen DeBoer. We have now seen for the second time this year that Alabama without Nick Saban does not have the same level of focus and killer instinct that they used to have, and that costs them football games. I cannot rightfully tell anybody that Alabama belongs in the college football playoff because you don't get your ass kicked the way that they've had their ass kicked multiple times this season now in games that they should come in prepared and then still tell me that you're one of the top 12 teams in the country. It was all right there for them. When you lay that sort of egg, when everything's in front of you, you don't belong in the college football playoff. Like Alabama at their best, playoff team. But Alabama is not at their best week in and week out. Week in and week out, they're maddeningly inconsistent and they lack the killer instinct that has defined Alabama for a generation.
I think that's kind of the tale of a lot of the teams at the top of the SEC. At their best, national championship contender. Just don't play to that level week in and week out. I look at Georgia, a team that played it really close against Florida and then turned around and really dominated Tennessee for 3 full quarters. Like, where's that Carson Beck? Where's the Georgia that we were looking for every single week? That's exactly kind of been the tale and the story of this Alabama team. And it's 3 losses, but 2 of those are bad. Really bad. A loss to Oklahoma is bad. This is an Oklahoma football team that felt like it wasn't even going to get to a bowl game. This was an Oklahoma fan base that's calling for Brent Venables' job mere months after he got a contract extension. And the loss to Vanderbilt, obviously, earlier in the year. And Vanderbilt isn't the Vanderbilt that we've always known Vanderbilt to be, but it's not like Vanderbilt's any sort of world beaters. It's not like this Alabama team, with all the talent that they have, had any business even being in a game with Vanderbilt. So you could probably sell me on some of these 3-loss SEC teams of They've beaten really good teams. They've lost to really good teams. They've been really competitive in some of their losses. I look at South Carolina. That was a couple of bad calls away from beating LSU. That was, just mere seconds away from beating Alabama, with a lot of good wins on their schedule. And I say, okay, I think that there could be a path with amongst the chaos and with the rest of the teams at the top of college football playoff. But I look at Alabama and their losses, how they've looked in those losses, and even how they've looked in some of their wins. You cannot tell me that week in and week out that Alabama is consistently one of the best teams in the country, which I think is kind of a shame, Fitz, because I do think that Alabama has a national championship potential. But that wasn't a national championship team that we saw against Oklahoma. That was not national championship Jalen Milroe that we saw against Oklahoma.
Well, and let's be clear, Alabama is not sitting here less talented, right? And Kalen DeBoer is a very good coach. So he gets his first loss in the month of November since he was a coach at Fresno State. That's crazy. Obviously he's a very good coach. There's no doubt about that. And it's a very talented roster. But man, it just takes a different level of focus to get the result that Alabama's used to getting. And Caroline, when we start talking about the resume, they have a significant win over Georgia. That's fine. And I will acquiesce to that being a very significant win. And there are teams that don't even have one significant win. But you're right. They got the loss to Vandy, the loss to Tennessee. They beat Missouri, who I'm squarely on the Missouri sucks campaign.
And
they beat LSU. Right. And they beat LSU, and we all know that LSU, is not as good as people wanted LSU to be.
Stinks. It's okay. You can say it.
I was being polite.
It's okay.
So I'm just looking at Alabama, and I'm saying, okay, well, where is the moment that you can show everybody this and say, hey, kids, turn this tape on. You want to see who Alabama is? Turn this tape on. It's one half of one game against Georgia. And we saw so much in one half of one game. They were like, no. I did it. I fell for it. And then, but where have we been since then? This version of Jalen Milroe, man, I don't trust this version of Jalen Milroe in the playoffs. I don't trust this version of Alabama in the playoffs. I cannot believe that they became, with the weapons they have on offense, to become that invisible against an Oklahoma team that does not belong on the field with you from a talent level makes no sense.
It doesn't. It doesn't make any sort of sense. And again, for the second time just today, and I think the third time overall this season, we had a premature field storming. Or 25 seconds left on the clock, and Oklahoma fans started rushing the field. This has to be a record number of field stormings, a record number of upright casualties this season. But can we wait until the clock strikes zero? Arizona State fans.
Look, I'm already squarely. I'm squarely on the. We got to stop this at something. Look, I know I'm the thief of all joy. It's going to take one person getting in the wrong situation. I cannot imagine how uncomfortable and difficult it is for the players on the field. As much as they try and protect them in this moment, they don't have the security to protect the players. The players should not be put in that proximity with a bunch of raging drunk fans at all. I believe that. I will die on this hill. Everybody says I'm wrong. It's going to take one jerk that does the wrong thing, and it turns into an incident, and we're all going to be sitting here saying, why did we let it happen? But for this to continually happen early, there's got to be some I don't care about your $200,000 fine, your $250,000 fine. If you storm the field early, make it a $10 million fine. All right, give some sort of a fine that makes an absolute juggernaut where they won't. Yeah, we'll present the menu. This is a Bryce Underwood fine. This is a Juju Lewis fine. We'll just go up and down the menu.
Yeah. This is your group of five right guard fine. So it's a little bit lighter than the 5-star quarterback fine, but still a fine nonetheless.
The Arch Manning fine,
Arch Manning fine. That's a hefty little fine there.
Yeah, that's a hefty fine.
Yeah. So you want to storm the field or you want Arch Manning? It's your choice, fans. It's your choice. Last thing on this game, there was, I don't know if you saw it, a really bad call. A really bad call. It was an illegal touching call on Ryan Williams. And the flag was thrown after, I want to say, one of the most beautiful catches I've ever seen, but it may have just been one of the most beautiful catches I've ever seen since the last most beautiful catch I ever saw from Ryan Williams. It was, I don't even know how far, a deep shot, Jalen Motor to Ryan Williams in the end zone, a great catch, a perfect throw. He is literally a ballerina playing football, and it got called back because of a very ticky-tacky and very obscure illegal touching call. Bama fans, that's not why you lost. You lost the football game because Oklahoma got 14 points handed to them on a silver platter from your quarterback. That's why you lost this football game. It wasn't because of the bad call, as bad as it was.
Yeah, you also lost this football game because you lost time of possession by almost 10 minutes because you were outgained in total yardage by 90 yards because Oklahoma had 5 more first downs than you did over the course of it, and you had 3 turnovers to their 1. You lost this football game because you got your ass kicked. Had nothing to do with the refs.
And had nothing to do with Caitlin DeBoer's sweatshirt. So enough. Enough with the hoodies. I can hear it coming. 2 of the 3 games we've lost, Caitlin DeBoer is wearing a hoodie. Like, there's no bad juju in the hoodie.
If what you wore changed the outcome of a football game at all, like, I've tried everything to watch my beloved Raiders on Sunday. I have tried different hats, different hoodies. If there's a magic sauce to that, like, look, I'm ready to make a deal with the devil. So if there's a particular, like, hoodie that I can wear, look, I'll tell you, Alabama fans, if I figure out that magic, I'll let you know.
Yeah, I'll do it. So wash your underwear that you wore, that one time 12 years ago when your team got a really big win. Wash them. I promise. They're not magical.
Yeah,
I promise you. You're not superstitious. You're just a little stitious. Just a little bit. Okay, we have to get into conference chaos. It was an absolutely off-the-rocker, hammer-drunk day in college football. So we'll hit some conference chaos after a quick break. Absolute chaos in college football. And I feel like if you're just looking at all the scores of the day and you're trying to do the mental math in your head, it's incredibly overwhelming. Let's break it down. Conference chaos, conference by conference, how each outcome has affected the conference picture and the playoff picture. Off the top, the ACC. ACC did not contribute to college football chaos today. Clemson took care of business against Citadel. SMU took care of business against Virginia. I heard some rumblings of that being a trap game. Yeah, no. SMU destroyed Virginia, and Miami destroyed Wake Forest. Any issues there? Anything to unpack there?
No, I would just say this. Miami did beat Wake Forest 42-14, but that game was close again in the second half till they busted it open.
Yeah.
There are just times that I sit here and think, man, Miami, I don't know. Like, I expected to see a different charged version of Miami, and I didn't. I still, right now, if you're asking me which team in the ACC I think is actually the best team of the ones you just mentioned, the most deserving of the college football playoff when it's all said and done, I still think SMU is representing the ACC in the college football playoff, not Miami.
And even Clemson feels like a very much so a long shot to me. The ACC feels like right now a one-bit conference.
Yeah, I mean, we got enough chaos today that, like, maybe that's the way they get their loving for a second team, depending on how this thing goes. But man, I feel much more comfortable if Miami somehow ekes out a win over SMU. I would be more comfortable putting both of them in than the opposite. If SMU beats Miami, then, like, let's just end that conversation.
Now we have to get into a conference that has some actually juicy shakeup at the top after today. The SEC. My goodness. Okay, so Texas was the number 1 team in the SEC coming into today. They took care of business against Kentucky. Texas A&M was tied at the top with only 1 conference loss. Well, Texas A&M lost to Auburn in 4 overtimes. So they fall to 3 losses on the season and 2 conference losses. Georgia took care of business. Tennessee took care of business against UTEP. Alabama loses to Oklahoma. Got their butts kicked by Oklahoma. Ole Miss loses to Florida. And can I just say, Fitz? I told you so.
Oh.
I told you so. So I put Ole Miss on upset alert. You said Florida was cute. You said that Ole Miss was going to win by 3 touchdowns. You said that this was the same Florida team that got their butts whooped by Texas. And no, they are not. This is a different Florida team. This Florida team is not bad. This Florida team could upset, I think, anyone in the SEC on any given Saturday. So allow me to take my victory lap. Thank you very much. And as I said, you do in fact owe me $1 million.
Okay, well, $1 million fake dollars, right? Here's the thing. I'm not
real ones.
Like you were right that Florida was different on the offensive side of the ball, but I died on the hill of that's fine, but who's going to stop this Ole Miss offense? I didn't realize Jackson Dart was going to do that. I didn't realize he was going to make it his single-handed mission from God to stop the Ole Miss offense. The stunning part to me in this game was that Ole Miss was incapable of scoring points. And that, I'll give you DJ Lagway having a great game, and Florida offense looking much better. You're right about all of that. But defensively, Florida just was able to confuse Jackson. I don't know what he was seeing. And some of the interceptions, it's not like, oh, I see he was trying to push the ball in here or there. No, they were just terrible throws. For a quarterback that I had high expectations for, I thought today was one of the worst days of Jackson Dart's career. It was a terrible day for Lane Kiffin. They were never able to get in rhythm offensively. That to me is the stunning part of this massive upset that frankly just absolutely eliminates Ole Miss from any playoff possibility.
It was the horrific interception with 1.5 minutes left to go. And at that point, Ole Miss was down 1 score. Ole Miss had the ball. Ole Miss had the ball from about 4-ish minutes left in the fourth quarter on. And I thought, okay, this is your opportunity, Ole Miss. This is your opportunity, Jackson Dart, one of the top offenses in the country. Games on the line, trip to the college football playoff on the line. Let's see what you can do. And he turns the ball over. And no, Florida, I think they went 3 and out. If they didn't, they ended up punting with about 1 minute left in the game. And I thought, okay, you are gifted another opportunity to score. Now go do it. And then Jackson Dart throws a near interception. Then Jackson Dart throws another interception that got called back because the Florida defender didn't have control. It was ruled an incomplete pass. And after that interception, Jackson Dart walked off the field and has tears in his eyes and he's crying on the sideline. And then they call it an incomplete pass. So he comes back out in the field, tears in his eyes. And look, you should have your emotions. I get it. I understand it. But you still have a job to do. You have your season on the line. And he comes out after being gifted not 1, not 2, but 3 opportunities late in that game to make a play and to keep his team's chances alive. And what does he do? Throws the ball right in the middle of 2 Florida defenders, throws 3 interceptions in less than a minute. And Jackson Dart, to me, one thing that I love about him, Fitz, his swagger, the chip on his shoulder. Everyone counted him out. Everyone counted this team out. Watch me make a play and watch me prove you wrong. I think you proved a lot of people right at the end of that game.
Well, I saw some mock drafts last week after the way he played a couple of weeks ago. I saw some mock drafts on the NFL side that were literally projecting him to be the first quarterback taken all of a sudden. People said, no, we're sleeping on Jackson Dart, which, yeah, I'm not saying that I support that. I'm just saying that this is what people are reading. That's how much the narrative was changing on him. And all of that changes again in this game. And to think about how wild this day was for the SEC, I fully expected Ole Miss to be a playoff team. They are not. I fully expected Texas A&M to be able to win their way into the top 12. They are now. They were outside the top 12 coming into this. They lose. They're going to be outside the top 12 again. I don't know that we can say definitively that Alabama is going to be in the college football playoff. And all of a sudden, if you're Georgia, the team that has played the number 1 strength of schedule in the entire country, you just found out that you're going to have to play in the SEC championship game in all likelihood against Texas before you get into the college football playoff. This is a disaster for the SEC.
So to that point, the top 6 teams in the SEC going into week 13, A&M lost, Alabama lost, Ole Miss lost. That's 3 of the top 6 teams at the top of the SEC. So now the updated standings, as I pull them up, Texas is still at the top of the league. Georgia is in second at 6-2. Tennessee is behind Georgia because Georgia has the tiebreaker with Tennessee. That still leaves Texas A&M in the 4 spot in the SEC. So if the season ended today, we would see Texas and Georgia in a rematch in Atlanta. You know who's the biggest winner of the day, Fitz? Tennessee.
Big time.
The Tennessee Volunteers. Ole Miss losing their 3rd loss of the season. Well, they get knocked out. That bumps Tennessee up in the rankings. Alabama losing. Well, that knocks them out of the college football playoff more than likely. Crazy things happen. That knocks Tennessee up in the rankings. And now Tennessee is sitting perfectly sitting pretty on the outside of the SEC championship game looking in. I think that's the perfect position for Tennessee to be in. If they take care of business against Vanderbilt, they're getting into the college football playoff. If you go to the conference championship game, maybe get injured, maybe lose a game, don't look very good in it, well, now you're giving the committee more reason to leave you out. I think Tennessee is just sitting pretty and saying, okay, everybody lose around us. We'll just continue taking care of our business.
Now, Tennessee at this point is kind of the Penn State in all this. Like, hey, we could just sit back. We're going to let you guys all fight it out. We're good. We're going to make the college football playoff. Speaking of Penn State, I would argue that Lane Kiffin has proven that he's basically, I don't know, maybe he's the Franklin of the SEC. I'm just saying.
Okay, but in James Franklin's defense, I feel like Adam. I'm playing Adam's role in the podcast today.
Yeah, you are. Franklin was nice enough to come on the show. I shouldn't bag on him. Go ahead.
And I appreciate him for coming on the show. It was awesome. If you want to check it out, you can find it. Preferred podcast platform, YouTube. James Franklin doesn't lose games that he wasn't supposed to lose.
Oh, that's a good point. You're
Lane
right.
Kiffin does. He loses dumb games all the time. Like Lane Kiffin, frankly, looking back on this season, that Ole Miss team had no business losing to Kentucky, had no business losing to LSU the way LSU has looked over the last few weeks, and had no business losing to Florida. Lane Kiffin will lose big games, and he's done that plenty in his tenure at Ole Miss. He also loses games that he has no business losing.
So walk through this with me for a second, because 12-team playoff, but as I've said repeatedly on our show, and I'll keep reminding people, it's really a 7-team playoff when we think a lot of it, because the top 5 conference champions are automatic bids. So the top 5 ranked conference champions, automatic bids across the board. So for the majority of the season, we've been sitting here saying, well, the other 7 playoff teams, God, they could all come from just the SEC and the Big Ten. We're running out of numbers. Like Georgia and Tennessee, okay, if we believe that Georgia and Tennessee in this current iteration, Texas is the conference champion, Georgia and Tennessee are in. If we're not sure Alabama's in, that's only 2 of those 7, right? So if same thing, if you go to the Big Ten and you start to look at the Big Ten standings, well, we believe that Oregon's conference champion. All right. So Ohio State's in. We believe that Penn State's in. So that's 4 teams. That leaves 3 more at-large bids. One of those goes to Notre Dame. There are still 2 at-large bids out there. It is actually, as much as we've joked through this whole episode about what's happening, there are 2 spots right now. So if you're Indiana, if you're SMU, if you're Alabama, if you're any of these other teams, there are still 2 spots out there that I think are not a given. With 1 week basically left in the college football season before we get to conference champions, there's 2 slots that are completely up for grabs. I don't know what the committee's going to do.
And even looking right on the bubble, BYU was at 14. Well, they lost today. Texas A&M was at 15. Well, Texas A&M lost today. Colorado was at 16. Well, Colorado lost today. Army was at 19. Well, Army lost today. And I think that we can say definitively Army's out in contention for the college football playoff.
Yep.
Of course, barring crazy things that happen in conference championship games, and the group of 5 still does get an automatic bid. So they're still alive in that context. But just, for now, that's kind of how it feels. So suddenly, a college football playoff that felt very crowded, a college football playoff that felt like they were going to be deserving teams on the outside looking in. Now it feels like there's not enough teams.
We're going to be sitting around being like, I guess, sure. Like sure, right now,
why not?
I mean, there's a real shot we could get 2 teams from the ACC or 2. They're going to have to decide between an extra team from the ACC and the Big 12 or an Indiana team that has no strength of schedule or a 3-loss SEC team. That is not an enviable decision to make in any of this.
Good luck. Good luck. We'll continue with some conference chaos after a quick break. plenty more conference chaos to get to. The question is, how much chaos did Indiana losing add into the Big Ten? Because you still have the two top teams in the conference atop the conference, and that's going to be Oregon and Ohio State. And of course, Penn State's still up there after they snuck by against Minnesota by the hairs of their chinny chin chin. But obviously, an 11-1, assuming Indiana takes care of business against Purdue next week, and an 11-1 Indiana team at least throws some wrenches into things. So, I mean, your thoughts on the Big Ten after the day that we had, Fitz? Ohio State takes care of business, Indiana loses, and Penn State doesn't look very good.
I think the Penn State not looking very good is going to be significant, right? Because I know they got the win, but man, all the way down to the wire, this thing just, I really wondered if we were going to be adding Penn State to the upset list and then trying to figure out whether or not Penn State actually belongs in the college football playoff. If they lose that game today, that's not an easy answer. So to me, it's really about where they're going to be seated. I would expect some sort of a fall. I know nobody necessarily looked the way we want them to, blah, blah, blah. I get all that. But like, you can't tell me that Penn State didn't at least present reasonable doubt, with the way that Minnesota game went down and all the way down to the end. I really felt like Minnesota had a chance to win that game at the end, just couldn't get it done. Gutsy 4th-and-1 fake punt call by James Franklin that really helped catapult Penn State to a win. If that isn't converted, we're sitting here trashing the call. Like, that's just the way college football works. But I wouldn't be surprised to see, look, Oregon's number one. Ohio State's going to continue, especially with that win. They're going to continue to be highly ranked, highly thought of. I just wonder if Penn State's about to find themselves ranked 7th or 8th because they struggled so much in that win.
Who leapfrogs them?
Oh, so that's a good question. That is a really good question.
Is it Notre Dame with a quality blowout win over a ranked opponent? Yeah, because we've seen Texas squeak by with some really close wins, but that hasn't affected their standings. So I think you're going to have to keep kind of the same energy, because I know if you look at the final score of that Texas-Kentucky game, well, it was a close game for 3 quarters. It was a 10-point win over Arkansas, and Arkansas got it within a field goal and late in the 3rd quarter and the 4th quarter. So I think you have to look at close wins, or at least games that were close for a majority of that game, kind of the same way. I understand that a 1-point win is different than maybe a game where you pull away in the end, or a game where the score looks a lot more favorable in the end than it did in the process. But who's deserving of being the number 4 team in the country over Penn State? I would say Notre Dame, maybe, but Notre Dame's got a bad loss. Penn State doesn't.
Yeah, but Notre Dame right now, the way they beat Army, I mean, Notre Dame today looks like the better football team. And Notre Dame was already put it in at 6. So I have no problem. Like, I could see Notre Dame jumping up to 4 and maybe Penn State falling down to 5, I guess. You're right, because what gets so tough about the college football playoff rankings is that, honestly, as I say, Penn State's going to fall. Well, the 5th-ranked team lost. The 7th-ranked team lost. The 8th-ranked team didn't look all that great. It was fine. The 9th-ranked team lost. The 10th-ranked and 11th-ranked team both have 2 losses. So, yeah, I think you're probably right. What becomes interesting is what do they do with Miami? Because Miami did, although you and I just sat here and said Miami doesn't look that great, Miami got the 42-14 win over Wake. Is Miami about to catapult their way up in this thing? Like, God, is Miami really better than Penn State? I don't think so, right?
That's where a lot of these things kind of just go into feel. And that's probably known as the eye test of just how do you feel about these teams? How much do you trust these teams? Because I cannot sit up here today and say unequivocally that I trust Miami more than I trust Penn State. I don't feel like Penn State today. I would not put money on Penn State winning the national championship. I wouldn't do that with Miami either. I don't trust either of those teams. I don't think that Miami has a resume deserving of leapfrogging Penn State in the rankings. Because when we talk about these teams that are right now not in contention to either make their conference championship or aren't at the top of their conference championships, now we're talking about seeding. Now we're talking about hosting versus being on the road in the first round of the playoffs. And being at home in Happy Valley in December is a whole lot different than being on the road in Athens, being on the road in insert college town here, because who the heck knows is going to be in this tournament at the end of it.
I mean, and it becomes a little bit surprising to me because you're right. Home field advantage is going to be so incredible for Penn State particularly. But what is surprising is if Indiana doesn't make it in this thing, the Big Ten gets 3 teams in the college football playoff. That's less than we would have expected a month ago. You know, like it's not just fall off of Indiana. It's also the fact that Illinois, like the Illini haven't really turned out to be what, you know, people wanted the Illini to be as of a month ago. So it really is kind of interesting just to look at the Big Ten, who we widely regard as being, you know, the other mega conference for good reason. But the fact is, they just don't have a lot of playoff caliber teams. They don't have a lot of depth in that conference of very good football. So with Indiana being right on the edge, I wonder if now that you do that exercise of seeing who's actually in, I wonder if we do see more opportunities for 2 teams to make it from the ACC, for example, or 2 teams somehow to make it from the Big 12. I don't feel good saying that, but, you know, maybe we see 2 teams
Who
make
knows?
it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's quality over quantity in the Big Ten. And I think that in the SEC, you have quantity over quality. You might have teams in the SEC that have 3 losses that most likely won't make the college football playoff. But if they got in the tournament, they could make some noise. Versus in the Big Ten, you have 2, possibly even 3, I'll go more so 2, legitimate national championship contenders. And in the SEC, you've got national title contenders that can lose to Scarbini State University on any given Saturday.
Scarbini State, what? Seahawks? Maybe we go like all
Scarbini. Yeah, I like the Seahawks. I think that's nice.
Yeah,
Is Scarbini State on the West Coast? That kind of feels like a Seattle vibe. I guess the Seattle Seahawks would make sense.
Yeah, Scarbini State. Scorpions? Oh, Scorpions are good too. Okay, now that I've
another West Coast team.
Scarbini State Scorpions. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll workshop it. Yeah, we'll reach out to the athletic director there at Scarbini State, see if we can figure something out. Maybe get some merch. We've put it off long enough. It's the Big 12 truly has my brain in a pretzel. The Big 12 is, remember the burrito guy? The guy that was it a Kansas State fan that shoved a burrito up his butt?
No, I think it was, yeah.
Yeah. That was a foreshadowing of what was to come in this conference. Because this entire conference, everybody's beating up on each other. You got fan bases that are rushing the field with a second left on the clock. You've got this conference is literally a descendant of the burrito in his butt guy. Like that, like that's what this conference is. It's just, you know, everybody's just shoving burritos up their butt in this conference. And so we had so much shakeup today. Colorado loses to Kansas. BYU loses to Arizona State. There's a 4-way tie at the top of the Big 12. I like the way that this conference shakes out. So now that Arizona State, although they have 2 losses, they have the tiebreaker over BYU. So that would catapult Arizona State to the top of the Big 12. But right now, if the season ended today, we would have an Arizona State BYU rematch in the conference title game.
Look,
edging out Colorado, who lost today.
It gets so confusing. The Big Ten putting out sort of the scenarios as it stands. And like you said, Arizona State, they have a couple of paths. If all 4 teams lose, if everybody loses next week, the championship game would be Arizona State and BYU. They win. They also win every tie-breaking scenario in a 3-way tie for first. So they need to. They seem to be the most set. It gets more and more confusing after that because BYU and Colorado are trying to figure out how this all works out. Like, this is sort of a dream and nightmare scenario all at once. If the goal is to get the best team into the college football playoff, there's our first question. Who's actually the best team in the Big 12 right now? Because it's not BYU the way they're playing right now. Kansas becomes the first unranked team in college football history to win 3 straight games against ranked opponents. Kansas has absolutely caused all of this. Kudos to Kansas for going in and getting that done. But now it feels like BYU sort of free falling at this point. It feels like Colorado, by way of losing to Kansas, had every opportunity in front of them, and then they got run all over in just one of the most grotesque defensive efforts we've seen all year. I mean, Kansas just went in and just absolutely demoralized them throughout the entire course of that game. Like, that was
330 rushing yards. How? How do you allow that? This Colorado run defense that we thought was looking so much better over the past couple of weeks than it had in the beginning of the season.
And the committee cares so much about, like, how's the line of scrimmage look? Well, Colorado just got their butts whooped on the line of scrimmage. Like, I mean, let's not get it twisted. Colorado's gone up in the rankings every week. The committee has given them respect every week. And they
deserve that respect.
Yeah. But they fell apart today. Defensively, they fell apart. I heard one analyst say, look, they've been irresponsible with their fundamentals. They've been irresponsible emotionally, and they haven't played well enough. And you saw a little of all of that in this game. Like, Kansas got under their skin. Stupid penalties hit Colorado in ways that we haven't seen for much of this season. They made stupid mistakes that they don't usually make. Like, this was a careless Colorado football team. And I don't really understand that, considering the fact that Kansas has played well the last few weeks. So now, all of a sudden, I'm looking around thinking, is Arizona State actually the best of these three teams? Maybe?
I almost want to say that despite all of that, despite Colorado putting up 330 rushing yards, despite Devin Neal having over 200 of those, I still think Colorado's the best football team in the Big 12. Like, that, maybe that's totally unfair of me. And we saw a bad version of Colorado today, a version of Colorado that frankly makes me incredibly disappointed in this Colorado football team. That I was like, look what you have done. Look what you overcame from losing 6 straight games to end last season to now being in a legitimate position to make the college football playoff. And you're going to go out, you're going to lay an egg like that and kind of act like boohoo crybabies in the process. Like, that made me disappointed in this team and everything that they had ahead of them. But I still say, on a neutral field, here we go again with our neutral field game, I still think that Colorado could beat any team in the Big 12, but they just didn't. And so you don't get to be in the playoff. You don't get to get a bid into the conference championship game when you look like that and you don't take care of business against teams that you're supposed to take care of business against. So, I mean, I guess by de facto it is Arizona State, but I still kind of feel like Colorado has the potential to beat anybody in that conference.
Wait, are we sleeping on Iowa State in the conversation? That's the only other, because right now we have a 4-way tie in the conference, right? And according to the Twitter machine, letting us know this, as Heather Dinich tweeted out earlier, just in case there's any confusion, Big 12 has confirmed that a 4-way tie at 7-2 between Arizona State, BYU, Colorado, and Iowa State would result in Arizona State versus Iowa State in Arlington. So,
okay, whoa. How does Iowa State get to Arlington?
They're in the 4-way tie.
So I understand Arizona State, they have the tiebreaker over BYU. I get that. Why is it not BYU?
So it's head-to-head, win percentage against all common conference opponents, win percentage against the next highest placed common opponent in the standings. Like, it's trigonometry to figure it out. But the Big 12 has confirmed it. The Big 12 has officially confirmed it.
I'll guess I'll trust the Big 12 on their own standings.
Well, got to trust them more than we trust any of their football teams. So now all of a sudden we're looking at, like, think about this. As we've workshopped this live during the podcast, I will say this. It's wild to think that we presumed that Colorado versus BYU was basically as close to a done deal as you could get, minus a little bit of chaos. And now we sit here 10 hours later in the day with a very real scenario that if the season ended today would be Arizona State versus Iowa State. Like, who saw that coming? And now you're BYU and you're BYU and you're Colorado, two teams like Colorado. We spent the whole morning hearing, well, they control their own destiny all the way to the college football playoff. Now they control absolutely nothing.
Well, they did control their own destiny.
Right.
But then they messed around and lost. And when you mess around and lose, you don't get to control your destiny anymore. But also, Iowa State still has to play Kansas State next week. That's not a gimme. That's not an easy one to win. Okay, so it would be Arizona State, Iowa State. Okay. Shout out to Kenny Dillingham, by the way. shout out to Kenny Dillingham. I think that Arizona State was projected to finish in the bottom 3 or bottom 4 of the Big 12. The way that I love Herm Edwards, I think he's a great guy, but the way that Herm Edwards left that program, it felt very just lifeless. Mm-hmm. And Kenny Dillingham has been like a breath of fresh air, literally like a defibrillator into that program that's just like awoken everyone in that fan base and has gotten everyone in the Valley to buy into it. And a Kenny Dillingham coach team with Cam Scadaboo on it, it has been so much fun to watch. So kudos to Kenny Dillingham. He gets a gold star from me today.
I love the idea. And look, if we're in this much chaos, this will be yet another one of those interesting things that we spent all last week talking about. But think about it. Right now, we have all of these ties right on top of this conference, right? And so what gets really interesting when you're trying to figure that out is what happens to the teams that don't make the conference championship game. It is, again, time to at least bring that up, because if you're talking about the Big 12 right now, you've got several teams here. You've got Arizona State, BYU, and Iowa State are all 2-loss football teams. Well, I guess my question is, if there's absolute chaos everywhere, BYU doesn't make the conference championship game, but they sit at 10-2 when this thing's all said and done. Do we know that they're going to fall so far in this process that they won't still find themselves in the top 12? I don't know. Like, then it becomes a 1-loss Indiana versus a 2-loss BYU. Like that's a wild proposition. I think it's tougher for Colorado. Colorado at this point, obviously, given the fact that, they're 8-3, they have that dreaded third loss. But I guess we'll find out how the committee values the 3. It used to always be, how does the committee value 1? Then how does the committee value 2? Now it'll be this week, how does the committee value 3?
And next year it could be completely different. Like next year it could be 4. Next year it could be 1 and you're out if there's so many undefeated teams. It's just more so than ever now that it's such an expanded field. Like, I think there's going to be way more varying variables. There you go. How's that for
varying variables?
Varying variables. That is, in fact, what variables do. Before we get out of here, we have very affectionately named our favorite award of this show, and we make it a secret from Adam. I don't know if Adam listens to the show whenever he's not on it. If he hasn't figured it out yet, but we have an award that we have affectionately called the Brenny. And we have named it after our dear friend and dear co-host, Adam Brenneman. And when he doesn't come on the show, well, then the Brenny Award goes to the team that didn't show up for work today. So we're just going to keep this our own little secret from Adam Brenneman until he figures it out. There are so many candidates for the Brenny today. Alabama, Ole Miss, Colorado, BYU, Indiana, I'll add them into the mix. Am I missing anybody?
Look, I'm running to the podium and I'm opening the envelope and I'm saying, congratulations, the winner of this week's Brenny is head coach Lane Kiffin. And I'm saying this because
congratulations, Lane.
When you run the same play on 4th down over and over and over and over, and I said over 4 times because that's how many times they ran the same exact play and it never worked. How is there not some point?
It worked once.
Worked once. Worked once. My bad.
Worked once.
How is there not a point late in the game when you need it desperately? How do you not look at everybody and say, hey, do we have another play we like for 4th and 1? Is there anything? What else is in the book? Like, I just want Lane Kiffin, who we sit here and build up as one of the great offensive masterminds in all of college football, doesn't have a backup play? Like, that gets you a Brenny. Like, your team is out of the college football playoff contention because you coached them out of it. You win a Brenny.
Important to point out that said play is a defensive lineman taking a direct snap. Like that's what you have in your bag of tricks.
And not even running up the middle.
Lane Kiffin.
Like, not even running up the middle. Taking that stretch out to the right. Like, so we're going to stretch this thing. We're going to take our 350-pound dude and we're going to make him run as far as possible to get a yard. Like, what are we doing? Like, it's fine if you want to do that once in a while, but you got to have a backup to that somewhere.
And shout out to JJ Pegues. That's the defensive lineman that took said direct snap. He's been like the big man's Travis Hunter this year. I think he has like 5 or 6 rushing touchdowns. Like, he is the go-to jumbo package guy. He's been super reliable all season long.
And he's been great on 4th and short. Like that, I understand why they use it. I understand why they use it. It didn't work today. So like at some point you got to be like, hey man, the bunny rabbit's not coming out of the hat. Do we have another magic trick somewhere? Like, and apparently the answer is Kiffin doesn't.
And I never judge a 4th down play call or a 4th down just decision to go on for it on 4th down in general, or decision to go for 2. I can't have a blanket assessment of you should always do it or you should never do it. It's always so situational, always situational. And just in the situations in which Lane Kiffin decided to go for it on 4th down, it just didn't make any sense to me. And one of them was their first possession of the second half. It's 4th and 1. You're down 17-14. And you decide to go for it, and you run that exact same play that you ran already twice before. Take the points. Take the points. It's 17-14 in the second half. You know it's going to be a low-scoring game. Your defense has kept you in a majority of the games that you've played all season long. Ole Miss has won games because of their defense. They beat Georgia because of their defense. Kick the field goal. Take the points. Tie the game up, trust your defense to get a stop, get the ball back, and then go from there. It just, like, situationally, it just didn't make any sense to me, and especially it doesn't make any sense when you continue to make the same mistake over and over and over again.
You know, the funny thing is, watching the Kansas game, they were critiquing at one point the fact that Coach Leipold continually was taking the field goal, and they were coming out of the red zone with only 3, and they kept getting really short to the end zone. The number of times the broadcast said, no, you got to get aggressive here. You got to get aggressive. And it's like, well, what do you know? They took the points, and they got the win. Like, at some point in certain games, I don't care what the analytics say, points win. Sometimes you got to score points.
And sometimes it's just the vibe of where your team's at right now.
Yeah.
And that's your job as a head coach, to know what your team needs. Does your team need to get aggressive right now? Does your team want to go out there and prove what they can do and, get 7 instead of 3? Like, that's what you should be able to evaluate and get the vibe of for your football team. Or are you in a position right now where it's take what you can get, move on, and live to die another day? And Lane Kiffin just has a tendency to Lane Kiffin all over himself. He does it every year. At least one game every single year, a big game, a game that you have to have, and Lane Kiffin gets cute with it. So congratulations, Lane Kiffin. This is your Brenny. Maybe you'll show up next time. Maybe Adam will show up next time. Who knows? But that is going to do it for us today. Always appreciate y'all for hanging out and stopping by the podcast. That's Jason Fitz. You can follow him at Jason Fitz. You can follow me at Caroline Fenton 1. Like the pod, subscribe to it, review it, wherever you get your podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever your preferred podcast platform is. Always just appreciate you guys for hanging out. So tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell a Kansas fan, because shout out to Kansas, tell a Florida fan, shout out to Florida. We'll be back on Tuesday night, and we'll have an immediate reaction to the 4th edition of the College Football Playoff Rankings, arguably the most dramatic college football playoff rankings yet. So we'll be back on Tuesday night. We're out.